Hi there and welcome back to my channel. My name's Charles and today I'm going to be looking at editing this waterfall image that I took at Lumsdale in Derbyshire. It's quite a soft focused image, quite a long exposure on the water. It's got quite an ethereal feel to it. So I was going to go for a bit more of a fairy tale edit on this one, giving it a bit more punch and a bit more vibrance than I normally do. So the first thing I'm going to be looking at doing, it was exposed for the waterfall here, so all the darker areas are slightly underexposed. And I didn't have multiple exposures to blend, so the first thing I'm going to do is boost my exposure just a touch, just to start drawing out some of them details. So I'm adding a little bit of exposure there. And I want this to be quite a contrasty image, so I'm going to add quite a lot of contrast here. So the next thing we'll do, we want to make sure we don't end up blowing out the highlights, so I'm going to reduce my highlights down, so minus 60 there. And just to really start drawing that detail out of the shadows, I'm going to pull this slider up here. I'm going to go to about 50, I think. So there we go, 56, that's okay. And as you can see, we've recovered quite a lot of detail from the darker areas. So the whites, again, I'm going to pull the whites up a touch, but not a lot, because I don't want to blow out those highlights. And the blacks, I'm going to pull a bit more detail out of the black areas. There we go. So I'm going to add about 25 there. Perfect. Now there's some lovely details in the textures here, so I'm going to boost these sliders a bit more than I normally would for photos. So I'm going to add 25 into my texture. I'm going to add 30 into my clarity, and my dehaze I'm going to add about 20. And as you can see, it's really sort of starting to bring this image to life. So almost like a dark fairy tale kind of image. So to give it more life, I'm going to add quite a lot of vibrance to this image. Okay, so adding 20 vibrance. And for my saturation, again, I'm going to add about 10 to my saturation, because I really want to make the most of those lovely sort of moss and lichen colours that we've got on the rocks here. Almost oversaturated and over-contrasted, but that's exactly what I want to go for. Now I'm going to just add create a bit of a curve here. So I'm going to pull a bit more out of the shadows and pull a bit out of the highlights and the whites. There we go. That looks great. And then next we're going to move down to the hue, saturation and luminance sliders. So here, the oranges, I'm going to reduce my saturation here because I want, in the water, as you can see, we've got some brown area, and I want to just bring that down a touch, just so it blends ever so slightly better, and so it's more desaturated to match in with the other rocks in the water. I'm going to do the reds as well, but I don't think that's going to make a huge difference, no. But we'll leave that as it is. So next, I'm going to move on to the greens, because the greens are really where I want to draw out more of that colour. So I'm going to leave my hue as it is, but the saturation, I'm going to pull that up to about 30. And my luminance, again, really want to draw those green colours out. So I've added about 35 to the luminance to brighten those sections of moss and lichen up. So aqua, I'm going to leave the aqua as it is. Okay, so in the blue, I'm going to leave the blues as they are for the moment, and I'm not going to affect the purples or the magentas either, because on this image I'm going to affect more of the watercolour using the colour grading. So the first thing I want to do is bring a bit more of a blue colour into the water. So I'm going to tweak my highlights to be into the more of the blue colour spectrum. I don't want to go too far, but I do want to make this a slightly more fairy tale image, and we'll do the same on the mid-tones as well. There you go, so we're getting some rather nice colour into the water now, just to really contrast against those rocks rather nicely. Shadows, I may tweak those do you know what? I'm going to leave the shadows as they are. I'm quite happy with the shadows. I think it would just be, yeah, let's leave the shadows as they are. I'm quite happy with those. Maybe just tweak the balance ever so slightly, just to give it a bit more of an overall wash. Let's get that to 10. So moving down into the detail, this image is quite sharp as it is. So I'm going to leave the sharpening, but I am going to tweak the mask so that the sharpening only really happens on the areas that need it. And again, there's no real noise in this image, so I'm going to leave the noise as it is. Let's zoom back out, and yeah, that's starting to look rather nice. I am going to add a gradient filter over here. I just want to boost this a little bit more. Oh, so I'm just going to reset these settings because and I'm going to just add a little bit of extra exposure. That's a bit too much actually. 0.25. So 0.25, and I might just add a little bit more contrast. And there we go. I think that's what I want. Now I'm also going to add a radial filter over the water here because I just want to tweak some of this colour. So again, I'm going to temperature. I'm going to give it a slightly more of a blue tint there. Let's reset these settings. And I'm also just going to drop some of that saturation to remove this hint of colour over here. So if I zoom in, so as you can see, I've got this sort of brown colour here. So I'm going to reduce my saturation just to improve the blend slightly. Yeah, that's much better. Great. So let's turn the radial filter off. Perfect. So I'm happy with this image as it is, but you know, this is going to be like a fairy tale image. And quite ethereal. So what I'm going to do now is take this into Photoshop. So edit in Photoshop. And I'm going to apply a bit of the Orton effect to this, just to give it that sort of nice, soft, dream-like quality. So here we are. The image is opened up in Photoshop just fine. The first thing I'm going to do is duplicate my layers. I'm going to duplicate it 3 times. So one layer is going to be for the Orton effect and the other one will be to just help with sharpening. So the first thing I'm going to do is apply a Gaussian blur to one of my layers. So Gaussian blur. Now this is a 24 megapixel camera taken on the Nikon Z6. So I'm going to give it a blur of 24 pixels to match that. And then what I'm going to do is go up to Image, Adjustments, and I want to adjust my levels. Now I really want to add lots of contrast here, so I'm going to draw this back just to where the curve starts to rise up, and then I'm going to pull the midtones the other way just to really add that contrast. I'm going to click OK, and let's just turn that layer off for a minute just to reacclimatise our eyes. There we go. So let's turn it back on. And then I'm going to drop my opacity to about 10% on that layer. If I turn that off, you can see the difference it's made. We've got a nice sort of glow to this image. But it is starting to blow out the highlights slightly on the water, which I don't want. So I'm going to add a mask. And I'm just going to brush over the lighter areas, just so we don't blow out those details. There we go. So the next thing I want to do is add a sharpening layer. So I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to drag it on the top. And as you can see, it looks like the image has gone back to normal. So I'm going to go to Filter, Other, and I'm going to do a high pass filter. Not a lot, because I only want to add sharpening to the finest details. So I've got a radius here of 2 pixels. So I click OK, and if I zoom in, as you can see, it's picked out all the sharpest areas of the image. And then I'm just going to go to my blending mode, and I'm going to change it from normal, and I'm going to go to soft light. And you will see, if I zoom in, if I turn that off, it just draws back some of that detail from the image that we lost when we added the blur. There we go. So there we go. I'm going to save that now, and that would take it back into Lightroom for me. So we go back into Lightroom, and as you can see, there's our finished image. We've not got any clipped highlights or shadows, which is great. And there we have it. There's our final image, which I'm going to put it up on screen now for you. I really hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial. If you did, it'd be amazing if you could like and subscribe to this channel, or if you've got any other tips and techniques for creating dreamy and ethereal images, please pop them in the comments below. But for now, my name's Charles, take care, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.